All right, and hello everybody, and welcome back. I'm glad you're here. Enjoy, have fun. We're continuing our discussion of a heavy lift drone. I wanted to discuss a military heavy lift drone. Heavy lift being that it's big enough to carry people. There is a large place of interest of a heavy lift drone where the rich lady and her two children leave the airport and get downtown quicker. And the only question I have is how many military soldiers will not be killed because that lady and her children got downtown? Zero. And how many military soldiers who have injuries will have a more rapid recovery and less damage from their injuries because that rich lady and her two children got downtown from the airport? Also, zero. So I just find I don't have much interest in getting that lady downtown. This is a heavy lift drone I've been working on. It's a military drone. I just by luck happened to pick this view that shows the tilt rotor. It's at 128 samples. And that tilt rotor is pretty simple. It's got a bolt here. If that's a 3/4 bolt, it's got probably 12,000 pounds of shear force that can be given to it. And this piston extends and this thing rotates down, and that gives you tilt rotor. This drone, because it carries humans, I designed it where it has available 2,000 horsepower. It needs 1,400 horsepower to suspend itself with VTOL, and it needs 300 horsepower to fly above its stall speed with fixed wings. So it has enough horsepower to actually hold itself up in the air and switch over to fixed wing. I don't know why tilt rotor seems to be so complex. This plane could actually be in the air with its nose pointing up and its tail pointing down and simply fly directly straight up. That seems to me to make transition from VTOL to fixed wing less complex. Now, this is showing this drone inside its hangar. This hangar is a series of sand-filled Heskey bags that have a truss covering over the ceiling. And the truss is really just these bridges that are constructed for use in wilderness areas for ATVs and side-by-sides and four-wheel drive vehicles to get people over a creek or a ravine. But the design of the truss, it doesn't actually lose its strength if you turn it over. These things arrive in pallets, and you just put them together. And you could put sandbags up here, and now you have a little hangar, a little storage facility for your military heavy lift drones. Pull it up so you can see it. And the specifics on this drone, the specifics include that it can go straight up 500 feet in 30 seconds using 8 pounds of fuel, and it can fly at 125 miles an hour using 136 pounds of fuel per hour. It has the two CTS 800 jet engines on it that are providing the power. I don't have them shown in this version. And this is 5 or 6 feet high, and I switched to a version of it that shows these jet engines. They're running hydraulic pumps, and it's being used here in its capacity as a device to deliver munitions. this distance right here is about 5 or 6 feet, and this distance across here is 5 or 6 feet, and this distance from here to here is 17 feet. So it can lift 1,000 pounds straight up, and it can have, this is with the drone plus 600 pounds of fuel plus 1,000 pounds of payload. These jet engines weigh about 250 pounds each. I have these jet engines running hydraulic pumps, and these pumps are sending fluid to hydraulic motors in these propeller motors. When I first started this, they didn't have an electric motor big enough to do this. This is 233 horsepower per propeller. There's 6 propellers. They're starting to get there with the electric motors. I still have the question of, if you have a 179,000 watt electric motor out in the air like this, does that motor emit radio frequency energy, radio waves, in a manner that they can be detected? Because if they can be detected, you have a drone that's detectable, and the military is not going to have any interest in it at all. So that's what we're talking about. And the question becomes, can this hydraulic system work? And there is a group with a hydraulic drone. The issue with any VTOL is you have to modulate the RPM of the propellers so that the device will stay in a stable hover. And the electric systems modulate it with power controllers. The hydraulic systems, they modulate it by changing how the valves work in the pump, at least the last time I looked at it. I want to have a system where the pump and the modulation valving system and the motors are all separate. So I don't think this exists anywhere. And the issue that comes up is, well, can you do that? And we'll talk about that. And when we talk about modulation, the question is, so what are you talking about exactly? But any drone is going to try to go up and down a little bit. It's going to try to go forwards and backwards a little bit. And it's also going to do a tilt this way or that way. And it's also going to want to try to tilt this way and that way. And there's no way to make that not happen other than to modulate the output of these propellers. And the only thing with almost every drone that can be done to modulate the output of these propellers is to change the RPM of these propellers. That's it. So the question then becomes, how do we know if this hydraulic will work? And my answer is, let's make a heavy lift drone with electric motors, because we know that's going to work, and find out what those electric motors are doing and see if the hydraulic systems can mimic it. And I'll show you some more about that electric drone, but there's a motor that makes 115 kilograms of thrust, and 115 kilograms is 253 pounds times 6 propellers. So it has a lift of 1,518 pounds. And I wanted to put those 6 electric motors on this frame. This frame would probably maybe $2,000 worth of metal, and your fabrication shop can make it for you probably in a week for $2,000. So for $4,000, you have a fully functional drone ready to go. It can lift 1,500 pounds, and this whole thing weighs maybe 400 pounds, and it's got 200 pounds of motor on it. And you don't even have to have the motor on it. You can have the motor over here, and this would be a generator, and you'd run electric wires over here because it only goes up and down a little bit. But what we want to do is get this drone into a stable hover and measure what's going on with the motors to see what that's all about. And now I'm going to do some math stuff to tell you what I think is going to happen. And I think, as usual, I always want to let you know what we're looking at. And I know that this is Scottish blackface sheep. This is what happened when I said the word do math. This is all the people, by the way, with knowledge of drones who are listening to me with a hydraulic drone, 1,500-pound lift on a 400-pound drone that can lift 1,000 pounds. And they're all just like, what? So I think that's kind of cute, particularly this one. Anyway, and of course, there's one other thing I think I should do. I do like to bring this out again, really. Hello and welcome. I'm glad you're here. You have a good time. I don't have enough wealth to create this, so we're just talking, really. I do have a YouTube channel. I invite you to subscribe. I think you would like it. I have a website, and you go to the menu, Not About a Robot, Heavy Lift Drone, and that's where you can read what I've written on my website. I always want to mention that this drone is big enough, if that propeller hit a person, I think it would cut them completely in half. So things can be dangerous. Any physically real object might hurt somebody. If you are managing a physically real object, my advice is manage it in a manner that is legally allowed and reasonable and safe. And if you can't manage it in that way, my advice is do not create it as a physically real device. All right, and I'm going to go quickly because it's math, and my guess is people aren't that interested. If the drone weighed 600 pounds and there were 6 propellers, then this number would be 100 pounds of vertical thrust. But the thrust is actually changing because this is the standard deviation. The central processing unit is altering the thrust to keep the robot balanced. And you can look at all sorts of math derivations. If you took a RPM sensor and sensed what was the RPM, say for example every half a millisecond, then you can see what rate of change was it choosing. You can see the magnitude of the rate of the change. You can see what happens for positive rate changes. The negative rate changes will be larger of what's available because the pushing of the air by the propeller helps to slow it down. This is another way of looking at it, but I want to look at it a different way because I think there's only really 3 variables that change with the propeller. One is how long did it take to change the RPM? The other one is how much of a change did you make? And the third one is the initial RPM value. And so you have the drone in the air stable and you measure these values, or you actually derive these values. And this I've got in here as points that were not measured. And it's okay. I think that's going to happen just randomly, but you want to imply that this is what you want. And so you smooth it out. This is the pattern, I think. I wanted to mention that as you get into higher RPM values, what's available becomes less because you can't change the RPM so fast when it's going so fast. The other thing I wanted to look at was this is what is actually being used. This is what the electric motor could do, but we don't care what the electric motor can do. What we care about is what really happened. And this is the drone with the hydraulic. This is what is available to be done by the motor if the motor was hydraulic. And this is what is the RPM changes by the electric motors. And in order to be able to use the electric system, the hydraulic system, the only thing we're required to do is take what actually was used in the electric model and prove that the hydraulic model can do it. And she is bouncing up and down looking at me, which means I'm out of time. So I'll do some more discussion of this with another video.